we always focus on kind of a small atomic element of using flow in these training sessions. And typically the actual training part of this session goes maybe 20 minutes or something like that. And then we like to open up the session for questions. And past history seems to suggest that you folks out there have lots of interesting questions, and we have interesting answers, and we'll go from there in terms of discussing. And as far as the Q&A is concerned, any topic that you want is fine. Doesn't necessarily have to be on this particular atomic topic of unpivoting data for import into flow. So if you could just be ready with your questions, in about 15 or 20 minutes, we'll get to that. And hopefully by the end of the session, you'll know what unpivoting is and why it's necessary, and how to do it. So what you're seeing here is my desktop where I've filtered all my flows. I've got hundreds of flows in my folder. What I've done here is I'm filtering the number of flows I'm looking at here, just the ones that start with the word drop. So that's for these drop-in training sessions. The particular flow I'm going to be dealing with today is called the drop-in unpivoting data version 1.0. By the way, these are all best practices for naming your flows. We always suggest that you name the flow with a meaningful name, and then always put a version number on it. You'll find that as you develop flows, these flows are going to be changing. You're going to be repurposing them, and having a version number is just really convenient and almost necessary for when you're sharing flows with others or just keeping track of what you're doing. So I've renamed this with best practices in mind. I'm going to show this flow to you in the edit mode rather than the view mode. Typically, flows are presented to an audience in presentation mode, but since these sessions have so much to do with the flow editor, I've always been presenting the flows in the edit mode here. So for those of you who are not familiar with our object data timeline and how flow works, basically any data object that is on a that's in a step in a flow is represented by a colored cell down here. We've got swarms, connections, labels, images, text, and maps, and buttons. So you're going to see some of just about all of those today. So that's just a real quick introduction to this data objects timeline. And maybe I'll say a little bit more about that later, but let's get back to the topic of unpivoting of data sets. Okay, so what does that mean? Okay, so here I've got a data set. It consists of a company. You can forget about this Z field for right now. It just places the data on the depth axis in an appropriate place. And now I've got 11 months of data here for going from January 2020 up through November of 2020. So this is a very typical format that you would receive a time series spreadsheet in. Okay. So things to note here is the data set shown below there's 55 interesting data elements here. And this is elements of foot traffic for 5 retailers during the 11 months of 2020, normalized so they can be easily compared against one another. So that's the data, 55 data points, but Flow expects a row in the CSV file for each data point that's displayed on the chart. So what this means is, hey, even though I've got 55 data points here, I'm only going to be able to show 5 of them within a flow, within a data point in flow. And what I've done here, each of these 5 retailer establishments has its own color code. And I'm going to click on this one here. So this orangish kind of color, this is Starbucks. And I chose in this pop-up, which we've covered in other sessions, by the way, I've chosen this pop-up just to show the data for January, February, October, and November of 2020. Just arbitrarily what I chose to show here. So that's the Starbucks data. here is the McDonald's data, okay, and here's the Target data and the like. Okay, so 11 fields, only 5 rows, which means only 5 data points. Okay, so how do we resolve this issue so that we'll be able to see on a flow chart all of these 55 data points? And that is the crux of what goes into unpivoting data. By the way, unpivoting data is a common thing. You can find a lot of chat on it out in the internet, and products like Tableau, Power BI, all these reporting products require some sort of unpivoting of data when dealing with this data in the types of graphical formats that we deal in it. So charts that have to do that need to be unpivoted are very limited in scope before the unpivoting. Like if you've got a 3-dimensional matrix here or a 3-dimensional scatter plot, the most you can show on is 3 dimensions. So what that shows that even if I had all 3 dimensions devoted to months, I'd only be able to show 3 months on this chart. So it's just not a viable way of proceeding without unpivoting. So the question is what to do about this. And here I just wanted to illustrate the use of a button. What I clicked on here is this what to do button, and I've popped up here, unpivoting is the answer. By the way, buttons perform actions, and there's a particular set of actions that are supported. And as you get into your activity and flow, you'll probably sooner or later you're going to probably want to do a button. Okay. So here's what I've done. I have used Excel, and Excel has an unpivot function. It's very well documented. About 6 or 8 steps it took me to go, and very straightforward steps in Excel, by the way, to go from my unpivoted wide 11 data column spreadsheet into what you see here, where now for each company, I have 11 months of data, and here's the data for it. So I've gone from a kind of a short, wide format to a narrow and long format, and this is the format that we need for importing into Flow. So when I imported this particular data set here, I now have 55 points. I haven't exactly counted them, but here I'm pretty sure there's 55 data points on here. So now what each data point looks like is the company, the month, and the value. Okay, so that's where we want to get to when we're dealing with flow, and this is what unpivoting has allowed us to do. So now I've got 55 data points in this format, and now I can do some interesting things with it. And I'm just going to take you through really quickly a couple things I chose to do for this session. So this first thing I'm doing, and by the way, you can find a more extensive this more extensive example in a flow that we have in our featured flows, which is called Flow About Flow. Okay, it's right near the end of that. And maybe what I'll do is I'll show that to you a little bit later. But this is the foot traffic normalized at the beginning of 2020. What I'm showing here is I have a filter on my data. So I'm only showing the 5 data points that happened in January of 2020. Okay. That's the starting point. Now, this may be a little choppy in Zoom, but I'm going to play you an animation that's going to draw the foot traffic chart, and take note of how it's drawn, because the way it's drawn has to do with the order in which I have my records in my CSV file. Okay, so here's what it's doing is drawing a map for Target, Home Depot, McDonald's, Costco, and Starbucks. So that was timed to take about 10 seconds. Hopefully that came across okay on your screen. And now what I've got is what I would call a classic 3D scatter plot. Okay, there are 11 data points for each curve, so there's 55 data points in this chart. And I've taken a little bit of time to make my x-axis very readable. I put these labels at a slant, and I've modified in a minor way some of the font sizes just so that the data in this chart looks really well. So these 3D scatter plots are very useful. They're very common in flow. It's kind of hard to find a flow without at least one 3D scatter plot. And the fact that it's a 3D space, you can look at this data in different ways. For example, if my primary interest was at the end of 2020 to see what things are most likely going to look like going into 2021, I might want to look at this chart from this angle, so I get a sense for what the momentum is coming out of 2020. Or if I just wanted to see how things went during that year, maybe I look at it straight on like this, and I see a couple things are apparent. First of all these establishments took some sort of hit in the month of March. But here, as we get into April, we see Home Depot had, I think it was all-time record foot traffic in their stores. And that's because people like you and me were tired of being cooped up in your home and in our homes, and we decided to go out to Home Depot and buy some things to fix up the house or whatever. Or maybe it was just to get out of the house and go somewhere. You can also see here that Starbucks never really did fully recover. I mean, even coming out of the year 2020, Starbucks foot traffic was still down by 24% from what it was at the beginning of the year. So there's all sorts of interesting things that can be gleaned from these 3D scatter plots, and they are empowered by using unpivoting of your data. Your source data is a data file with each column being a month. Okay, you have to unpivot it so that only 1 month appears in each data record. Now, we saw how this chart was drawn in the animation. We first drew the Target curve and then the Home Depot curve, McDonald's, Costco, and Starbucks. So let me go back, and I just want to show you an alternative way of doing this visualization. Let me just replay it for you once again. Okay. So there's the Target curve, the Home Depot curve. So I'm animating these curves in a sequential way where each retail establishment animates in sequence. Okay. Now what I did is I sorted my CSV file. It's the same data. I sorted the CSV file in a different way, and now I'm going to play you the animation that happens. I'll get the same starting point. I'm going to play you the animation that happens with the sorted CSV file, and you'll see this looks very different. Okay, so on this animation, instead of animating by retail establishment, I'm animating by month. Okay, I'm just going to play that for you once again so you can see it, and apologize if any of this is kind of jumpy in Zoom. But here we've got the 5 charts animating in parallel, basically. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show you about unpivoting, why it's necessary. I haven't dwelt too much on how to do it, but each of these products, Excel, Power BI, Tableau, they all have their own sequence. All the sequences are pretty straightforward. In Excel, I think it's exactly 6 steps that I follow. And you can go out onto our help center. And Sierra, maybe if you could be prepared just to tell us a little bit about how you navigate the help center. You can go out on the help center and find information that has to do with a multitude of topics, including kind of rules for your CSV file and how to do certain things in your CSV file. Okay. If we don't have a detailed article out on our website right now having to do with Unpivot that shows you the steps, let's say in Excel, we'll make sure we get that out there if it's not already there. Last thing I wanted to show you here is, let me close down first of all, and if there are any questions as I'm talking about this, please feel free to interrupt. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to go out onto our featured flows. Let me take my filter off because there are no featured flows that begin with the word drop. Okay, at a.flow.gl, there are about 25 what we call featured flows. These flows are all unique. They're all really interesting. They all use very good technique. They all have great visualizations in them. And I recommend that if you're just getting started with flow, go out onto this this website here, a.flow.gl. Look at some of these featured flows, and you'll learn something about, hey, what others have done in terms of visualizations, and you'll probably pick up some really good ideas here. I just want to take you through a couple of flows. I'm not going to take you through. I just want to show you the results of unpivoting for a couple of flows here. The first one I'm going to show you is the flow about flow. I mentioned that before. This is a good flow, by the way, to go through just to get a kind of a sampling of the types of visualizations we do, and to get an idea of what, as a company, what our market is and what we're looking at. And what I want to go here is the last couple steps of this flow. So this is going to look familiar because it's exactly the same thing I presented to you earlier. But in this, instead of having a very simple data set with just 55 data points, this data set has thousands of data points, because what we're doing is we're showing the same foot traffic starting from the same place. But in this case, we're doing it on a daily basis. So let me just show you how this animation works. And this particular animation is set up so that it will animate in parallel. Each of these retail establishments will animate in a parallel basis. So here we are. This is animated to take 20 seconds, I think. We're tracing foot traffic through the year 2020. Exactly the same shape of curve that I had before, except this is daily rather than monthly. So this does give you a richer presentation. And coming out of the year, since this is on a daily basis, you can kind of get a better feel for what the exact daily momentum was of foot traffic in these various establishments. So that's a featured flow called the flow about flow, and it's just got a really good illustration of a 3D scatter plot, which was made possible through unpivoting of the data. Another flow I just want to show you real quick is one called IMHE COVID Inspection Story V.6. Okay, kind of a lengthy name, but the reason I want to take you through this one is because I think it's a really great flow that illustrates unpivoted data and how these 3D scatter plots can be generated with unpivoting data. In the early part of this flow, we're talking about how many people have been infected with COVID at a particular time, and we're using a mechanism of displaying dots in a circular, I think it's called a Fibonacci pattern, for conveying that information. But what I really wanted to get to are these charts here. So here we got, this is going to be almost the same kind of thing that I did earlier in this session. Here we've got many months of data, and we've got COVID infections for the United States, for the UK, and for South Africa. We're just going to compare these. So this first chart does a very nice job of showing the infection rates in these three countries. And then we come to a point where, hey, the things really go off scale. So the author of this has kind of tilted the chart so we can see how high in the sky these charts are going. And this is in the early part of 2021, I believe it was. Okay. And then we bring this down. So we've rescaled the y-axis, the height axis, so we fit all these curves on the same chart. Then the author of this flow these are infections. Then he's in orange, he's overlaid that with the hospitalizations. So here you can see the hospitalizations for each of these three countries over time. Okay. And then the final thing that the author of this flow did is he put in the death rate. And you can see that the death rates were pretty high here in early 2021. But as technology and vaccinations and things have evolved, the death rates are just not going anywhere near the same height that they were early in the pandemic, and even as early 2021. So that's just another flow. It shows some really good 3D scatter plots. And once again, all this is made possible by unpivoting the data so it's in the best format or the right format for display within Flow. And that is about all I'm going to say. Sierra, did you want to say some things about the Help Center? Then we'll open it up for general questions.
Yeah, that's great. Do you mind if I share screen just to take people through it?
Okay, I'm going to unshare. Yeah.
All right. So this is our Help Center. Let me just show you the way you can access it on our site. So if you go to a.flow.gl, it'll be up here in our documentation section. Let me just try and get some of this stuff out of the way. Okay, so it'll be up here in our documentation section. So if you just click on that, that'll bring you to our Help Center. And so we have a lot of different things here. Obviously, there's this big search bar kind of for users if you don't really know where to start, but you're looking for an answer to a question specifically, like something regarding maps. You can just type in maps. And then, you have a couple of articles that appear here, and you can click on them. It'll take you there. And there's usually a video that I've done, but there's also, some text that links to other articles that's somehow related. But just going back to the main page, we also have just like a getting started tab. So this is helpful if you've never used Flow before, you want to figure out how to register, get your data in there, which Bill has talked a bit more about today, and making that format nice. And then also this glossary of terms, I feel like is pretty helpful because it also has a link out to these just various articles, and kind of helps you get familiar with the lingo that we use for things. And then the last thing I'll mention is, or a couple more things. We have guides and tutorials where each one of us, myself, Bill, and Michael, has a different way of teaching you how to build your first flow. So that's helpful there. An FAQ, frequently asked questions, that's self-explanatory. And then a link to our video playlist, which is actually on YouTube. And it's all of these training sessions that have ever occurred to date will be posted on there specifically. So if I click on that, you'll see, about 16 videos so far. So we'll just keep posting these and updating them. So if you miss one, it'll be here for you. Oh, one more thing, actually. Let me just quickly share screen again. I just remembered. Something else that's important is this submit a request button. So if you click on that, it'll go into this kind of forum where you can contact us if you need anything, report bugs, kind of, do any features you'd like to see that are not there yet. Report that here.
Thanks, Sierra. Any questions from anybody about the Help Center or what Sierra was just referring to?
I have one. Do you guys happen to have had a demo of maybe website traffic that you guys have done for somebody already that I could take a look at?
We certainly have done at least one website traffic project, maybe a couple actually. Yeah, that's private customer data. We'd have to get the customer's permission to share that. But the essence of that flow was kind of the 3D scatter plot that I showed. It showed the website traffic over time, and it was set up so it would be able to correlate the website traffic in conjunction with various promotional things that the company was doing.
That's exactly what I'm looking for. So you don't have to share it per se, but if there's already a path, I would love to take a look at that.
Yeah. You know what? If you send an email to Bill, BILL at flow.gl, I'd be happy to set up a quick Zoom call with you to kind of discuss that, and I can describe at a I can describe in a fairly detailed level what these particular customers are doing. And Sierra, do we have any demos along that same line that was just asked about website traffic?
I think the flow that you showed today of foot traffic is probably like the most similar demo that we have.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so anyway, if you'd like to discuss it in more detail, just BILL at flow, FLOW.GL.
Will do. Thanks, Bill.
Okay, great. Stephen submitted a question in the chat. He says, can we have a company logo live in a flow throughout all the steps? Yeah, the answer is yes. Your logo would be a image that you would import into Flow. Very easy to do. Just have to have the image out on your hard drive and specify it as an image in Flow. And then that image can be set up so it always appears at the same spot on the flow. And there's some other approaches we could probably also take, but very common use case is to have customers have their logos that appear on every step of the flow.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that. We do have just a few enterprise customers that are looking to white label or add their logo into the bottom left-hand corner where the Flow logo is, or the top left-hand corner on full screen. And yeah, we take that sort of a case-by-case basis, but it's possible. Yep.
There's a quick question here from Christina. She says, from an educational perspective, and Christina, I understand you're a high school student. Great. How do you envision this possibly working with students? Well, actually, we have an interesting new customer just coming on that is going to be a high school student kind of application. And what this particular, it's an international school. What this international school is going to do is they're going to be setting up a set of user IDs that they're going to provide access to Flow through. Each student for each semester will have a user ID and will be able to work in Flow to work on class projects and the like. And then at the end of the semester, those user IDs will be recycled in for the next set of students. And what they're also planning on doing is saving the flows that the students develop so that they'll kind of have an ongoing legacy library of flows. So that's just an interesting anecdote that's just getting off the ground right now for it turns out, a high school.
And I might just add 2 cents to that real quick, which is that I think that's, the real opportunities here is a lot of, I think students are really going to drive so much innovation inside of Flow. That's a lot of these visuals that we're building, I could almost imagine as school projects in regards that in a similar way that we help people prepare presentations or slides and to present, that now the onus is how do we present virtually? That's 95% of people are presenting virtually in meetings as opposed to in person on stage. And that practicing and being able to present that way actually is a skill set that is very valuable. And so I'm showing this data set, which is just something I was working on the other day. It's a really basic, there's not much, it's a really basic data sets, but you can very, I think, easily extrapolate this out towards enabling students to create presentations in addition to utilizing it for teaching students. So I think that two-way communication pathways is really important, that they're creating as well as consuming.
Okay, thanks, Michael. There's another question here. Could we create custom maps or shapes? Would love a semicircle or full circle map. This is from Stephen also. Yeah, to answer part of your question, I'm going to also ask Sierra to comment on this. To answer part of your question, we do have the capability of creating custom maps. So this is a it's a map, like the map of the state of Kansas or a map of Europe or whatever. As long as you can go out on the internet and find a map that suits your needs in the form of a shape file or a topo.json file, you can use Flow to create a custom map. And once a custom map is created, it behaves like any of our standard maps. And as time goes on, we are adding to our portfolio of standard maps by putting custom maps, by generating custom maps and then publishing them for general use by our customers. Having to do with a semicircle or full circle map, Sierra, do you have any comments on this part of the question?
Yeah, as long as you can find a shape file that looks like the visualization you're talking about, it can be converted to a topo.json and imported. Other than that, you can also use an image and then map your CSV file to your image. I also saw that we missed some of Stephen's questions from earlier about custom fonts, which we don't have the ability to do. It's really complex because we have to render the text to be in 3D space. So, getting that into our software is pretty manual right now. And then as far as examples that show robust points on a map that include photos, links, etc., we have a lot of map examples in our featured flows. One of the featured flows that does not have points on a map, but it does have photos and links, is our Voices of VR. And that's on our featured flows page. And then I'm just going to answer a couple more questions I saw in the chat. Solomon asked, the discount says it's for next year. What does it mean? It means the discount code lasts for a year. So you'll be able to get that, promo code for 1 year. And let me see. Oh, you already answered that, Michael. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Was there any other questions? Can we export the file and play it independent? You can.
Yeah, I was going to just quickly address that. So I think actually this might be something that's Sierra's planning to cover more tomorrow, which is more into this area called snapshots. So we recognize that we want to do as much as we can inside of flows, that you load your data in and you feel like you're basically manipulating this data, exploring it, creating steps. But inevitably, there will be some functions that we will not be able to cover. Like we're not going to build a process that you can add a machine learning algorithm to run some regressions against the data set. That's not in our near-term futures. But this idea of adding in snapshots to basically slice and dice this is kind of interesting. And Sierra will go into it more, I think, tomorrow. But what this allows you to do is creates hierarchies of data. So it's not quite a pivot table, but it's very similar in that you are grouping objects together. So in this case, this is a survey data from looking at Will Smith and Chris Rock and sort of the Oscars and some of the drama there. And anyways, what you're seeing here is that first it's grouped by side, like who are people supporting, and then the age bins is the second level down. And so you can keep adding more and more levels here, but basically what that does is aggregate the information up. And so in this case, we're just counting the number of respondents for each of these categories. And sorry, this isn't super understandable yet, but I'm just trying to show a quick preview of some of that. So a little bit outside of Flow, but I think we will cover some of those topics tomorrow. And
I also saw an email from Christina. It was a follow-up question. Yeah, Christina, it sounds like you want to talk about more specifically about how this could possibly be made available to your high school. Why don't you send an email to me? I just put my email in the chat, and let's take that offline. I'd be happy to do a conversation with you or a Zoom call just about any time to discuss that. We can move it forward in that venue since it's kind of specifically for your case. Let's see, any other questions in the chat or any any questions that want to be expressed verbally?
Oh, I was just going to make one other comment, which is on fonts. So we will be adding more fonts. We're switching our font engine. So Sierra alluded to it, but one of the first things we ever built was like our own custom text engine that Oculus wanted to license from us for a while there. And since then, other text engines have come out and with more fonts. So we're going to start probably switching over to that. But it is something we actually are it's harder than you might imagine to get good text in a 3D environment. It's easy to get text, but hard to get very crisp text in a 3D environment.
Yeah, and to answer a little bit more about the question about exporting and playing independently, you can record videos, of course, of yourself either in VR headset and play those back for people to kind of get an idea of the 3D space, as well as, you know, AR videos that you've probably seen on TikTok, as well as even if you wanted to record yourself presenting a flow like in a Zoom meeting where, you know, like Michael does, you put yourself really small in the corner and have the flow behind you. So there's some options as far as presenting the flow, but just sending out the URL works too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think will be a topic we cover in a future lesson for Owen for that question. And I'll also put a link in the chat window. I think there's an older one where I describe sort of the presentation modalities in the AR, but we'll be sure to cover that again to enable people to create that. And then Sierra, do you have a spot in the help desk? Or I know we have like a quick user guide for the AR filming.
Yeah, I think Bill has that quick guide.
Yeah. Oh, and if you wanted me to send you, let's see, we're kind of constantly revising that guide, just adding little tidbits to it. Send me an email and I'll reply and provide you that guide. And I'll make sure also the one we have posted on our website is current. In a nutshell, these AR videos, the process is, first of all, you generate the flow. So you've got your flow developed, and then you want to generate an AR video from it. What it takes is the flow, okay, and a phone. So you can put the flow, so you can establish the flow as being resident in your living room, hanging in space in your living room or in a field or wherever you want it to be. Okay. If you want to have some drama in the AR video where you want somebody to film it as you're delivering it, what you would do is you would use your phone to navigate to and through the data as you're presenting the data story on the AR video. And then if you had a colleague who was collaborating with you on this to film it, that filmer could actually, using his or her phone, could also get some motion into the filming. So instead of just being a static presentation of you and the data flipping through the flow, the person could actually be in motion also and could be observing things from different angles. And those make, I think, for the best AR videos. You don't need a second person, but if you do, you can just derive some benefits. So it takes two people, two phones, and a flow to do that. No special software required. And increasingly, our customer base is getting increasingly active in doing these AR videos. So pretty interesting topic.
Hey, Bill, is that, you probably said this, but there is a tutorial on that somewhere?
Yeah, so I actually just posted the link into the chat window, and Bill had alluded to a quick guide that we put together for AR videos that we're constantly updating. So we probably should, we'll decide on a version here to post online.
Sounds like we have a visitor here.
Bill can email instructions in the meantime. Sorry.
Not a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. I will. Yeah. Happy to send the quick guide or pointers to anybody who emails me for additional information. But it's really been encouraging over the past 4 or 5 or 6 months that what I call mere mortals like you and me are actually making these AR videos. So it's an interesting venue for presenting flows, and we're delighted that it's just gaining increased interest and acceptance in our customer base.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's see.
Any other questions? Looks interesting, but it's
Yeah, and let's see. I don't.
oh, thanks, Inkit.
Um,
Glad it blew your mind.
Solomon asked the minimum hardware and software, and then any cheap VR headsets you recommend. We recommend the Quest 2. That's pretty much our standard when it comes to VR headsets. Any other answers about hardware, software?
Just to add on to that, you know, Oculus is already discounting that product quite a bit to make it attainable. So in terms of the amount of hardware you're getting for the money, it's definitely the best. There are some cheaper options out there, but most of them, well, anyways, definitely Oculus is by far our highest recommendation. We can recommend other things too, but that's sort of our number one for VR right now, for the immersive setting. Yeah. But the main problem is just the or not problem, but the main how to phrase it. Sorry, I lose my train of thought. The main requirement is that it has a WebXR capable browser. So for Oculus, that's the Oculus browser. For Microsoft, that's Microsoft Edge. And then for HTC products and a bunch of others, it's Firefox. But Firefox historically has had just tougher performance issues. Their rendering pipeline is different and it's not optimized, and it's been a known issue for a long time for them. So we'll see if they update it. But in the meantime, highly recommend Oculus as well as Microsoft Edge in the meantime. And then hopefully Safari here soon.
So let's see, in wrapping up here, are there any other questions? Sierra, Michael, are there any other answers we want to give if there are no questions?
Yes, one last answer, which is just to someone else's question on mortals building flows. I have to present this sometime, but I've been trying to collect at least some people that have been posting their own flows or AR versions, including Seth out there. And so anyways, I've just been super excited and inspired to see all these flows going out in the wild is what I'm calling them. So yeah, people are building them, and it's been really cool to see. So please do hashtag flow immersive. I'll try to come up with some other hashtags or something so we can track them all, but we'll definitely be encouraging, or reposting and trying to highlight our community, both on our featured page, but also on our social pages too.
Okay, well, if no further questions, thanks everybody for spending your time with us. You're welcome to attend any other sessions you want, and keep those questions coming. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, bye-bye.